I welcome you to today's community talk show. Our topic today is how has closure of CSOs affected your work? With me today, I have a panel of 3 CSO leaders. So today, our talk show is going to run from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and it's brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator for today. My name is Lake Gender Fancy. I'm an advocate, I'm a tax consultant and a lecturer at Gulu University. So today we have a panel of 3 CSO leaders to discuss for us this topic, which I earlier on mentioned, that is how has closure of CSOs affected your work? So we have a panel of 3. The first person, when I mention your name, you can just put your video on and wave to us. The first person, we have Miss Joanna Atukunda. Yes, I can see you online. So Miss Joanna Atukunda, she's a founder of UPLIFT SLUM Africa. She's also the co-founder of League of Young Professionals and works with young people in slums. So Miss Joanna, you're welcome to this talk show. Our second panelist is Miss Turyatunga Rebecca Juna. Rebecca, you can put your video on and wave. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us for today to discuss with us. Miss Rebecca, she works with Shema Development Foundation, and she's the founder of Juna Foundation. She's a female young activist, and our work focus in rural is on rural women empowerment and juvenile rehabilitation. I thank you so much for joining us for this talk show. And then our third panelist who will be joining us in a bit is Mr. Mbiheebwa Edward. He is the Executive Director of Masindi District NGO Forum. And he has been in the NGO sector for a long time, and he has done a lot of work in Masindi District. So when he joins us, we'll be able to introduce him and he will join us in the discussion for today's topic. So as earlier on I mentioned, our topic for today is how has closure of CSOs affected your work? So I would like to give this topic an introduction before our panelists are able to dive into the discussion. So as we know, Uganda is a signatory to very many international instruments that talks about civic and political rights and liberties. Most notably, we have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and we have the Constitution as well locally here. That is the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. And all those enshrined civic and political rights in this country. So now, how this topic came about is that on 20th of August 2021, the National Bureau for Non-Governmental Organization, that is the NGO Bureau, which falls under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, halted the operation and indefinitely suspended 54 NGOs. And the Bureau stated that this was due to non-compliance with the NGO Act of 2016. That was what the NGO Bureau stated. Now, to break down the 54, 23, the Bureau stated that we're operating with expired permits that was contrary to Section 31.1 and 32.1 of the NGO Act 2016. 15 of the NGOs, the Bureau stated that they failed to file annual returns and audited books of accounts to the NGO Bureau, contrary to Section 39.2 and 3 of the NGO Act and other non-compliance issues. And then 16 of the NGOs, the Bureau stated that they were operating without registering with the NGO Bureau, and that is contrary to Section 29.1, 31.1, and 32.2 of the NGO Act 2016. Now, all this led to the suspension of some of the NGOs were indefinitely suspended, and then others, their activities were altered. Now, let's dive a little bit into these provisions to break it down, the provisions that the NGO Bureau allegedly stated that these NGOs failed to comply with. They included, that is section 31, section 32.1 of the NGO Act, section 29.1, 31.1, 31.2 of the NGO Act. Now let's dive a little bit and break it down. Now, NGOs are governed by different laws in Uganda, right? They are governed by the Constitution. There's the NGO Act of 2016, among others. Now, in this act, it establishes under Section 5 the NGO Bureau, that is the National Bureau for Non-Governmental Organizations, is established. Now, it has functions and powers. This NGO Bureau has functions, for example, under Section 6, and then it has powers under Section 7. Now, among its functions, it has to establish and maintain a register of organizations. And then among its powers under Section 7, it can summon discipline organizations by either warning the organization, suspending the permit of the organization, exposing the affected organization to the public, blacklisting, among other things. So those are some of the powers that the NGO Bureau has, and it invoked that power. Now, under Section 29.1 of the NGO Act, they are supposed to register. NGOs are supposed to register with the NGO Bureau. And then under Section 31.1, they are not supposed to operate without a permit. Then under Section 32.1, it provides for renewal of permit, that the NGOs are supposed to renew their permit within 6 months before the expiry of this permit. And then Section 39.2 and Section 39.3 that talks about filing returns, which the NGO Bureau felt that some NGOs had not complied with that section. Then the last bit was on registration. Now, this led to the NGO Bureau altering the activities of some NGOs, like I stated earlier, and others were indefinitely suspended. Now, some CSOs came out actually on Twitter posting their returns that they had filed, stating that this is the evidence. So government is not right to have done this because we filed our returns. We have seen this on Twitter, for example, with Chapter 4 Uganda. And then there have been big concern around this move that was made by the NGO Bureau. Other CSOs came out to say that this is going to cloud back against that CSOs have made in this country. And then others, we have seen some citizens come out and say that this move was just made to silence independent civil society organizations, while government, on government side, government says that no, this is basically non-compliance with the law. And that is why today we are discussing the topic with our panel of 3, and we are now going to delve into the discussion, having had the legal background where the NGO Bureau is coming from. So, as our topic remains, how has closure of CSOs affected your work? So now our panel is going to delve into the discussion based on that background. And I would like to start straight away with Miss Rebecca. So my first question, this being a community show, is that to an ordinary Ugandan in the community, what work do CSOs do? Yes, Ms. Rebecca, you have the floor.
The closure has affected the financial bit of being able to implement work, but also the networking bit to share ideas on how to tackle development challenges that are happening in the community, because you would refer to some of these organizations.
Okay, let me interrupt you a bit before we delve into how the closure affected the operation of CSOs. I would like you to give us an insight into what CSOs do so that an ordinary Ugandan out there is able to appreciate this topic.
CSOs help the government help monitor government programs through civic education of the local grassroots persons to understand the role of government and how they can follow up the different projects and government programs. They also build citizens' capacity to be able to play their roles as citizens in terms of paying, like, for example, if you're supposed to pay taxes, what's your role and contribution to society is as a citizen of Uganda. They also help within the development process because when you see partnerships with the government, you see that there are projects that have been done in conjunction with CSO and government. So we are partners with government. We're supposed to be partners with government. We're supposed to voice the call of local persons. We are supposed to speak where the people that elected have been able to speak on their behalf. So basically, in a nutshell, that is what CSOs do for the community, for the grassroots person. I believe that's one way the local people can understand what the work of the CSO. Yeah. So Hansi, you can hear me?
Yes, I can, and yeah, that's a good response to that question. I think we will be getting back to you on that at a later time. I would like to bring Ms. Joanna into the discussion. So earlier on, I introduced the topic and gave a legal background to the closure of the CSOs. And there was a question that was posed to Ms. Rebecca, who just responded to it about what the CSOs do. Let me bring Joanna into the discussion. So what is the current state of CSOs in Uganda?
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, so sorry, power went off, so my Wi-Fi first went off and I had to buy data since I couldn't wait for it. I'm sorry I went off, and thank you for today. Thank you for this opportunity. And when you ask about the state of CSOs right now, I must say we are all in panic because we don't know we don't know the future. We are asking ourselves so many questions of yes, there's by the time they formed the NGO bureau to accept these NGOs, there's a reason. They were definitely doing a lot of good work, but here we are because of the political interests that they do not want to be questioned, and they are closing without a clear reason, because just to put away a few faces that make them feel like they're choking them. And so the state of NGOs and CSOs right now is in panic mode. Like, we do not have a guarantee of tomorrow, and that's a very bad thing to live as if we are refugees in our own country. So we are in a panic mode. We are in a mood of uncertainty. Yes, and yeah, that's.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that insight into the current state of CSOs, which sounds very, very worrying. My next question is to Rebecca. So the closure of the CSOs, government on their side, that is the NGO Bureau, cited non-compliance with the NGO Act. Do you think that was the reason why government closed CSOs? So, or you think there is another agenda behind the closure of CSOs?
Thank you, Fancy. One of the things I believe is that that was an excuse that was used. When you want to have, when you have issues with somebody, you use what people see and say that is what the excuse is. But for me, I believe that it's because you saw these people submit their returns on social media. I believe they should, it would have been clear that, hey guys, you are getting a little bit political, and and we don't like that. It's just an excuse, but would also ask that whatever misunderstandings are between the two, they are resolved, because it's the local persons that are suffering. And also, we don't have to do it that way. We don't have to do it that way. We do not have to suffocate each other to get a bit of what we want. We can always go back to the dialogue table and say, hey, this is how we're going to do things. For me, I believe still I affirm that it was quite an excuse. More, it had a political agenda, because the organizations that were closed, they were touching the political, and to understand the political is personal. And yes, government decided to take its course and close them. I think the elections are done. We can now open up. The elections are done. I believe we can now open up for the community to benefit from the different activities that these NGOs had in their work plans. So thank you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that insight. Now we would like to go into the actual discussion of today's talk show. That is, how has the closure of the NGOs affected your work? Because at the beginning, when I introduced the panelists, we all understand that all the panelists are working in the NGO world. So we would like to go into how has this closure affected your work as a leader. Before that, I've seen Mr. Edward has joined us. Mr. Edward, you're welcome to this talk show, and kindly unmute and put your video on and introduce yourself. Thank you.
This is Edward Mbiheebwa, the Executive Director, Community Driven Network Uganda, that was formerly Masindi District NGO Forum, and we work in Bunyoro region and West Nile. I'm glad to be part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward, for joining us. Earlier on, we gave this topic an introduction, that is, how has the closure of the CSOs affected your work? We gave it an introduction. Our panelists were able to define the work that CSOs do in the community to a lay person. We were able to delve into the discussion, and at this point, we are going to discuss how has the closure of the NGOs affected your work as a leader, as somebody who works with an organization that is a CSO. And I would like to start with Joanna. So how has the closure of the CSOs affected your work?
Thank you so much. And I, first of all, I approach that question from a point of wanting to question the government and why they are thinking that closing the organizations now is going to help. First of all, why were they accepted in the first place? It was to help the government do all the other work that they cannot do on their own, supplement their work, and be able to add value to humanity in terms of if the government is not able to extend a certain service, but an NGO is there to do so, then that relieves them of the burden. But now, if they're becoming scared right now, or if they're feeling like NGOs and CSOs are pinching them where it pains hard, then we will have many other issues. And right now, of course, it's a thing of when two elephants are fighting, then it's the grass that suffers. So the NGO work that we are doing it's not that it has not been helping people. It has definitely been impacting people positively in communities and every other arena, when it comes to politics, when it comes to health, when it comes to policy formation and implementation. So at the end of the day, we are not just as NGOs. Yes, we're going to be affected in how we are doing our work, but then what becomes of the people that we are giving these services? They are the ones that are suffering more. For example, if I'm into leadership that has a lot to do with mentorship and young people, and then they close my NGO just because I gave an opinion about politics. So at the end of the day, I'm not able to like do the programs I'm supposed to do. I think it was just last month, for instance, I tweeted about how girls were getting pregnant at 9, and this girl in particular got pregnant twice in the last lockdown and this lockdown. And then I tagged the Minister of Education, who happens to be the First Lady as well. And I wake up to temporary temporary put down of my Twitter account, and I'm like, okay, this is serious. And then they tell me your last tweet was violent in a way that you attacked the First Lady. And then my account was put down temporarily for about 48 hours. Yes, and I'm thinking, of course, someone tells me when they put it down, they're busy going through whatever you've been posting. And then I'm thinking, okay, right now we can't have our opinions as people who are into the NGO world and are meant to help these people. It looks like when an NGO comes up and says this is being done the wrong way, then there is a problem. They're not supposed to be questioned, and yet the government is not doing enough to help these people. So we've been affected in so many ways, not just us, because I mean our partners who are maybe like the direct supporters financially are not able to support. Then the person on the ground who we are trying to help is in just because us we might be in like a half-baked state, but the other person is in a very raw state. They cannot get services, they cannot access what they want, they cannot get the support that they need. And so we've been affected in so many ways. First of all, in terms of service delivery, and then putting out opinions and helping the public. Because when you go to these communities, truth be told, those the people are excited. They feel like, okay, now the government failed to do this. Here we are now. We have like a savior. They're going to help us. But guess what? We are also being tapped on the nose like dogs. So we can't do the watchdog work because we are. I mean, they've put a cloth on our nose, and I think this is not even just a cloth, like a polythene. So service delivery, giving out of putting out opinions and being able to defend the person on the ground has really been hard. And then generally people are also, it's not just us that are living in uncertainty, but also the people that we are giving these services are equally living in uncertainty, and for them it's even worse. So yeah, I really put out to say that the closure of NGOs has not just had effects on us as leaders, but most importantly, the grassroots person who is the most important person to the government, but they are not looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that. Let me bring Edward into the discussion. So Edward, earlier on, we noted from your introduction that you're the Executive Director of Masindi District NGO Forum, and you've been in the NGO world for some time. So with the closure of the CSOs by the NGO Bureau citing non-compliance with the NGO Act of 2016, how has this affected your work?
Thank you so much, Fancy, for the question. Ideally, the closure of NGOs has broadly affected us as a civil society organization. Maybe to also remind you that it was Masindi District NGO Forum, but now it's called Community Driven Network Uganda. So we see a lot of silence among the civil society organizations recently due to the closure of very many CSOs. You'd see many of us civil society organizations were engaged in advocacy, anti-corruption work, policy engagements, and so on. And in doing so, you point out the challenges, the gaps in service delivery, like in roads, construction, health service.
Is it only me who has lost Edward for a bit?
No, I think we've have equally lost him. He's frozen, something like that.
Okay. So as we wait for him to come back, let me move to Rebecca. So how has the closure of CSOs affected your work?
Okay, at a personal level, it's demotivating and it's demoralizing and it's challenging that it brings in a little bit of fear and uncertainty of what is yet to come. You know, if you've been giving something your all and then you see people that organizations that you would believe should be protected being shut down, you say, you know, I won't cross this one and I won't cross this one. But when it comes to monitoring and tracking service delivery of government programs, it should be 100% in it. At a community level, it has left community members lacking out because you're not going to get the zeal to give it your all because you know that you might cross somebody and in the end you might be shut down. At a national level, we see shrinking civic space that limits the work, especially of around transformative leadership, to question power, to speak truth to power with confidence that, you know, as a citizen, as the leader of civil society, you're holding people to account. But these days you will not want to speak based on will I be shut down? So it has created such an environment, and it's not a good environment because we're supposed to be each other's keepers, to say, you know, as the government, you're not doing this right, and then they will say, okay, as the civil society, you're also not doing this right. Let's keep each other in check. But if it's one-sided, then we are not going to serve the people properly. We're all going to have shortfalls. It also has created a space where the financing has been limited, the networking has been limited, because you don't know if you remember chapter 4, you would just give a call and say, hey, OPO, just there's this person, how do I handle this? How do I, you know, in terms of human rights, is this okay? Is this not okay? But seeing that even a leader had to get out of the country for safety, it leaves you to, am I even able to afford a ticket to go for safety out of this country? Can I get asylum? Such things. So it leaves us, you know, at isolated. It's like, hey, if you don't do this, we'll punish you like the other person. But I also believe that it is re-energizing that means that people are doing a great job, because they wouldn't close if you're not doing great. That means they're doing a great job in terms of accountability, and that means that we should push on. Thank you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Joanna. As we wait for Edward to get back, let me, I think that was Rebecca, yeah? Let me bring Joanna back into the discussion. So we have seen the NGO Bureau citing NGO Act. Previously, we have seen government using Public Order Management Act, and then there's a Computer Misuse Act. So to what extent is the law being used to curtail the activities of CSOs?
Thank you so much. So first of all, I think the laws that are being used in Uganda, I don't know. I don't even know why they are there in the first place, because it looks like they need to be they're put on paper, and then after that we are in a whole different world, because from the history of the NGO Bureau, when they sat down and said, okay, let's do this, and of course the registration and everything to form the NGO Bureau in 1989, and then they get to put the NGO Act in 2016. So when you look at the act and everything that has to do with it, it looks like they were saying, okay, you have a go ahead, you can do this, you can be part of the government when it comes to doing different activities, because we're not just looking at just a few NGOs. The funny thing is that NGOs entail so many other things that are not just the CSOs that are the watchdogs of politics and elections and everything. No, it comprises of NGOs in health, in religion, and all the other sectors, in education. But then when they and of course when they were doing the NGO Act, it was focusing on all these things. But guess what? When it came to suspension, whatever, I don't know if it was just a suspension of a week or two or a month, but I think it's indefinite suspension for some, until people come up and say, no, this, like, enough is enough. So when the act was put out, and it was inclusive of all, like, they were looking at the entire NGO world that has all the health, the education, the religion, and everything. But when it came to closing, they picked out a few that they felt they were choking them. And so what is that supposed to mean? It's a thing, it's what would say selective, I would say selective judgment, because if you establish, one of the objectives of the act was establish an administrative and regulatory framework within which organization can conduct their affairs, and then promote and require organizations to maintain high minimum standards of governance, transparency, and accountability. But now, all those are not looked into. And one thing that we must acknowledge is that these acts are put out with very good objectives that look like that sound accommodative, but then nothing is being followed. Because if the second objective is to promote and require organizations to maintain high standards of governance, transparency, and accountability, and now when they're trying to do that, you feel like they are choking you, because no one should question your governance, no one should question for you to be accountable. It generally puts it out that these acts are on paper and nothing is being followed. So when you say, is the law being followed? No, according to the act, nothing is being followed, because there is no cooperation, there is no mutual partnership, there is no shared responsibility, there is no what I would say, yes, mutual dealing to say, this is what we ought to do according to the objectives, this is what is stipulated, and this is what we ought to do. But we are just ambushed as NGOs, as CSOs, we're just ambushed into suspension with all baseless kinds of issues to just pull out a few people. Because if they're putting out because according to the news they put 54 NGOs have been closed, but when you actually look into those that were attacked, it's only the civil society organizations that are out there to make sure the government is accountable, is being transparent, is doing good work when it comes to governance. So I personally have to say nothing has been followed. The act is not being followed, and the law is definitely not being followed. As when it comes to the constitution, like people have been tweeting, it's just that side work paper that the president chooses when to put off something and cross and put another, so that on the final paper it is the finest of work that suit him. So yeah, the law and the act are not being followed when it comes to the NGO Act that they sat down and decided to put out, and all its functions have been left in the pipeline. Actually, they have been dropped and left in the cabin for the government and its people to do what they want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Joe. Let me bring back Edward into the discussion. So, Edward, you are discussing for us how the closure of CSOs has affected your work.
Thank you so much again, Fancy. Sorry, I was interrupted by network, but now I'm back. I was talking about the linkage, the effect of the closure versus the work that we do. And I pointed out that most of us are advocacy organizations. And the work we do touches sensitive officials in government, touches sensitive sectors. And I mentioned, for example, health, education, roads, and construction. And we reveal gaps in service delivery. And by and large, we come into conflict with a number of officials. However, even then, when we come into conflict with officials, there are those that are always on our side, especially those that are working towards the effective service delivery in the community. And the closure kinds of sets a lot of fear into civil society organizations in relation to the work they do. When you look at the CSOs that were closed, including even the donors, that is TGF, they are funding a lot of work in terms of accountability, and the CSOs that have been engaged in the accountability, when the closure comes, there is a way it affects the work that we do in terms of, you're worried, should I engage into this? Will I be seen right with the government? Won't someone now take it that I'm fighting government when I'm engaged in this anti-corruption campaign? Will it be well with so and so, who is probably a decision maker at a higher level? Won't I be branded someone who is anti-government or a terrorist or something like that? And yet you find that a number of CSOs are doing their work smartly. They are not involved in anything that is actually against the government, but they are doing their work in advocacy. But because of the closure, there is that fear that is set across civil society from the lowest part of like from the grassroots up to the national level. So there is that fear. It has already created a lot of fear, and it could compromise the work of CSOs when it comes to advocacy, because you're left stranded. You're like, will this put me right? Because sometimes, we get recommendations from the RDC, from the CDOs, from for you to renew, or sometimes to register with government. So this actually has created a lot of fear, and it can also bring about program shift. I think of recently, we've not had a number of programs on sensitive programs from CSOs. There is sort of program shift in terms of the work that we do. So it is likely to even have to compel us to even shift our strategic focus, our strategic programming in such a way that probably you don't need to, you fear to annoy someone or to step on the toes of certain people. In a way, it will compromise service delivery, the flow of work, and at the end of the day, we are likely to see more loss of taxpayers' money, more loss of more shadow work, and more so many things not revealed, because we engaged in, say, revealing public expenditure tracking and follow up and so on. But just because as you're doing that public expenditure tracking, someone is also following you to find a loophole, to find a trap for you where you can again now start negotiating with government on your maybe legal status, whether you're right with government, or maybe someone can brand you that maybe you are in money laundering and so many things. So there is a way there is sort of a program shift, and this calls for us CSOs to be united, because what is happening right now calls for unity among the CSOs, for strong networking, for building that kind of cohesion among CSOs to engage government. Otherwise, this kind of isolation can put us, take us to extinction as CSOs by and large. That is what I could comment for now. I could always come back with more ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Edward, for that insight into how the closure of CSOs has affected your work. I would like to get back to Rebecca. Now, on the side of the NGO Bureau cites non-compliance with the Act. And they cite some NGOs had not registered at all with the NGO Bureau. Yet earlier on, when we read the law, we discovered that you cannot operate as a CSO if you're not registered. And then they cite other things such as not filing final returns and so forth. Do you think that CSOs had a contribution into the closure? Do you think there was some negligence on the side of the CEO of some CSOs that led to the closure?
Thank you, Fancy. Before I answer that question, I want you to imagine a scenario whereby you're going to monitor and track government programs that have been implemented by the cow or the town clerk, who happens to be the district NGO monitoring committee chairperson. I want you to imagine that scenario, and then you have to operate later. So I'm giving you an imagination. Imagine that in your mind, how it would backfire. One, I believe that would be the negligence of the side of the bureau, because how do you tell me people have operated and you have a district monitoring committee and you do not have this feedback, and then you wait after how many years you come and say, hey guys, we're closing you. But I also would want to ask NGOs, let's have our own backs. You're registering to have your own back. There are fears as to why some of these NGOs are not registering and are remaining as companies limited by guarantee. But if you're going to do NGO work, kindly register so that tomorrow it does not come and backfire. However, that being said, the same NGOs were saying that we're not registered, and then they sent in their papers, apart from a few that we did not get feedback from, the others that we didn't get feedback from. But I think it's going to take the NGO Bureau and the NGOs sitting down and finding a better working relationship between the two of them and how they can move forward. We saw where they were accusing of the NGO Bureau asking for money and bribes. That is something that we need to resolve. If somebody has to operate and you're frustrating the registration process, it's also something that needs to be resolved. So there are two sides of the coin. Not enough effort into registration, and also not enough effort into making the registration a little bit easier. If you're to see the registration for an NGO, you have to get like 1,000 things. This would be something very simple and user friendly. Also, apart from all those details and recommendations you have to get, you're going to also have to deal with asking for bribes. No, I think that is not the way to go. I believe that maybe some of these NGOs did not register because of frustration, but also it's paramount for the leader of the NGO bureau to get back and check and have a good working relationship with these people, especially the leaders of NGOs, and how to move forward, because we are development partners together with government. We are not standalone bodies. We are development partners. We are moving forward for the good of the country, and therefore it is prerequisite that we work together. Thank you, Fancy. Back to you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that good response. I would like to bring Joanna in. So, Joanna, when you look at even the creation of the NGO Act, the NGO Bureau is to bridge the gap between CSOs and the government. Do you think the NGO Bureau is living up to that standard?
So first of all, thank you so much, Fancy, for that question. I might beg you to like pardon and repeat the question.
Okay, as Rebecca kindly mute. The question is, the NGO Bureau, even right from the NGO Act, it's supposed to bridge the gap among other functions, a gap between CSOs and the government. Do you think the NGO Bureau is living up to that standard?
For me, I think the NGO Bureau and the NGOs themselves, we are not living up to the standards. First of all, the NGO Bureau, in its establishments and objectives, it points out the working environment to be a kind of partnership, to be like these two, the government and the NGOs, to work hand in hand. And I would say, yes, the government has so many loopholes when it comes to the act itself, because they have not lived up to the objectives. And at the end of and even when they've not lived up to the objectives, we still see a lot of what I would say, a lot of backlashes, because they are not satisfied of what they are getting from these NGOs. And when that happens, it simply means that they are just going to run away from their objectives, which are looking at partnerships. And I would say, like Rebecca said earlier on, the NGOs are equally playing a part when it comes to failing to seek out real partnership in registration. As much as the bureaucracy of registration is choking, the NGOs are equally not doing like maybe the fullest of what they're supposed to do when it comes to building partnerships. But also, this act in its presentation, it's not definitely it's definitely not providing a conducive and enabling environment for the NGO sector. When you look at the act being able to strengthen and promote capacity of NGOs and their mutual partnerships with the government in terms of providing corporate status for the NGOs, and registration, then regulating, then coordinating and monitoring, that is not being made, because the partnership is failing at a point where, if someone has to be a good partner, then they are pro-government 911, which is definitely not going to be that way, because as NGOs or CSOs, if we're supposed to monitor what the government is doing and give reports, it means we are opening people's eyes. So that means the government will feel like, okay, the only way we can have partnership with you is if you're only saying the good things, but if you're giving the report as well, it better be just there not to incite violence, quotes in quotes, like they always say. Because even when we see NGOs producing these reports about governance, about health, about politics, about democracy, how many times do these government people get back to read those things? No, they usually waiting for the reports from the National Bureau of Statistics, which many times never does these surveys and to give people the correct version of what is happening at community level. But when CSOs and NGOs come up and do this work, then they are attacked. So in a way, actually, in so many ways, the NGO Bureau is not being followed when it comes to building partnerships, when it comes to coordinating, when it comes to mutual partnership, because they feel like these NGOs must be pro-government, and if they can't be pro-government, then there's going to be a problem. Because even when you look at the NGOs that were suspended, they're not NGOs that are just there dormant. No, those dormant ones, even their registration licenses expired way long time ago. But those that are active, and let me tell you one thing we must also acknowledge, is that the NGOs that are actively monitoring the government are registered, are being compliant. They're doing everything because they know what it means to be anti-government. They know what it means to be anti-government. So they're doing everything to be sure they're in the good books of registration and regulation. But because they're not being pro-government, this act is not being followed. And also when it comes to the registration, the NGO Bureau is making it very hard for these NGOs to register. And of course, when they read everything that you're going to do, the objectives, the whatever, they make it look like, okay, it's okay, so we're going to register you. And then it takes ages for these licenses to be put up. It takes a lot of things. You edit your work until you prove that you're not going to say anything about the government. So the act is not being followed, the objectives are not being met, the mutual partnerships are not being followed, simply because these NGOs are not being pro-government. But also the NGOs ought to like come up and say, this is our stand. We need to get these NGOs that are coming up and say, if your objective is this, stand your ground and say, this is what I'm going to do, and then we shall look at the compliance of the NGO Bureau, because it's them that are failing to be compliant when it comes to registration and partnerships. So I must say they've really failed the NGOs. The government is not following the NGO act that they put up, and it was to support the NGOs and CSOs. Thank you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that. Now, back to Rebecca. I would like you to compare Uganda to other countries in terms of giving a conducive environment for operation of CSOs. How are we faring when you compare to other countries?
Thank you, Fancy. I believe the civic space is shrinking all over the world. If you to look at Black Lives Matter in the USA and how they are touched down and how they beat up protesters, the civic space is shrinking all over the world because it's CSOs NGOs are one of the main account tracking mechanisms for government. In comparison to Uganda, we are still at a good. We are still good. We have mistakes here and there. We have wrongs we do here and there, but we are not yet that bad. If you're to see in Guatemala, you'll see NGO leaders shot down. If you're to see in Mexico, them dealing with the drug lords. If you're to see in North Africa and the Arab world, I don't think there is a voice for CSOs or NGOs. So I believe as Uganda, we are still doing great. We have a little bit of challenges here and there, but we are trying our level best to ensure that there is partnership, there is space for coordination, there is space for dialogue. And we always know when the time for CSOs space to be interfered is towards elections and after elections. And then, so you know that within a 5-year time frame, as a CSO or as an NGO, you're going to operate between the second year, the third year, and then the fourth year, you're going to slow down. And the fifth year and the first year, you're going to have to minimize your operation. So I believe that we are catered for. I believe that that will move forward compared to other countries. Our freedom of expression is limited, but we still can use the spaces. If I to compare this with Norway in terms of advocacy, you see that we are low. We are a bit low. If you to compare it with China, we are a bit high. So it would need us to go per country and see, but I believe that Nordic countries are ahead of us. The rest are still in the bracket with us. They're doing the same things that they're practicing things they do not preach. So yeah, that's my submission. Back to you, Fancy.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that comparison. Let me bring in Joanna. So looking at Uganda this time, from the coming into place of the constitution, that is 1995, coming forward to right now, how do you think Uganda is faring in terms of providing CSOs with a conducive environment for operation? Do you think we are worsening every day, or we are getting better at provision of a conducive environment for CSOs to operate?
Thank you so much, Fancy. When we look at the state now, I must say we from history, like when NGOs started getting on board and so many people getting the awareness that they can actually run NGOs, we've seen so many of them start, and as much as the process is tiring, but they've persisted and they're getting there. But we are at a state where we NGOs and the support with the government and partnerships is stagnant, in a way that yes, all these NGOs have been formed, people are working, but the support from government in terms of mutual understanding and partnership is a way frustrating. You can only run a successful NGO if you're having a hand here and there with the government, which is most definitely in a supportive way, I should say. So from history, yes, I must say we have moved such a great journey of having people come up to start NGOs, be vocal about them, and but then if the constitution is going to be edited like a speech every other day, if these acts are not going to be if the objectives of these acts are not going to be followed, if we're going to be choked just at the bottleneck every day, then we're going to be in a state of stagnation where we cannot deliver, yet we are in the community, we are standing by to do what we're supposed to do, but then there is no tangible result when it comes to we fought for this and here it is. Because for every single act and policy that gets into parliament through the CSOs and NGOs, it takes about 5 years to be approved. So how many things are we like? For how long are we going to be waiting if just one policy to be approved is going to take 5 years? Like, every parliament just has to approve one policy that has to do with helping people, and then the rest of the policies and things are just about them benefiting. So I feel like we are in a place of stagnation, that they'll just approve one thing, and then the NGO and CSO world is going to be like, well, we fought for this, but after how long? So we are in a state of being choked and then stagnant a little. However, I must say we are moving, and the fact that we can still talk about this, there is hope. Yeah. Thank you, Fancy.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. Would like to move a little bit away from the closure of the CSOs. So let me bring in Rebecca. So what are some of the other challenges that the CSOs face aside from the closure that just happened? Yes, Rebecca, the floor is yours. Aside from the closure of the CSOs that just happened recently, what are some of the other challenges that the CSOs face in their operation? Okay, thank you. So let's have Joanna. So aside from the closure of NGOs, what are some of the other challenges that the CSOs face in their operation in Uganda?
Thank you, Fancy. So apart from the closure, of course, NGOs have been having issues when it comes to operation. The government cannot be taken out of the equation, because you get into communities and then you put out your work, your whatever you're planning to do, and the vision and objectives. But of course, you still definitely have to work hand in hand with the leaders. But what happens is that while you're preaching one gospel, the political leaders are preaching another. So you find yourself in a place of wanting to correct yourself every other time, that you're there for good reasons and not to take advantage of them. So that is one. We are having two different gospels of operation as per the objectives of the organizations and what the political leaders are putting out there to the community. For instance, when I was recently doing my projects in the Katanga, we had to go like through the entire process, which was smooth. But on the day of implementation, we get there and everyone in the community is running, and we are wondering what's happening. And then they're telling us the chairperson LC1 and the assistant at loggerhead, so one has run away with the office keys, and then we do not know what to do. Because I mean the entire village is in some kind of confusion. Everyone is running up and down, and then by the time you get the organizers to see it, time is gone. So as they're fighting their political wars, the NGOs are suffering okay, not suffering per se, but they're being we are not doing the activities we are meant to do at a particular time because of the political loggerheads. And then in the other operations, of course, there is a lot of monitoring when it comes to what NGOs are doing. The government is over monitoring, and monitoring wouldn't be a problem, but monitoring to look for the negatives definitely affect the operations of the CSOs and NGOs. And then, even before the closure, we see the registration bureaucracy being very, very unfriendly. Like it's way beyond normal bureaucracy and procedures of registration. So by the time you register an organization and get done with it, you have been swept off a lot of time, and by the time you start implementation, you're always working behind calendar, because I mean, you wasted a lot of time during registration, and yet you could not implement before you're fully registered, because they're going to require all these things when you get to the leaders in the community. So I feel like the operations are choked at the registration level, we NGOs and CSOs are working behind schedule and plan programs, and then the politicians being at loggerheads, and then the NGOs now this time they are the grass, they suffer in their operations, and so many other things that definitely do not take away the politics. Of course, the communities equally have a role to play, because they be thinking, when you take a good project to the community, you either want to be a politician or you want to take advantage of them. Also because I mean the leaders there are spreading the gospel that this is what they want. They probably want to just use you guys and get the money, yet they are not getting the money from the government. And then this whole paycheck for the leaders, sometimes like young people who are just starting our NGOs, you don't always have the money to give out to the leaders, but every time you meet in the community, because a certain NGO gave them an allowance of 100,000, they are expecting the same from you, which usually is I should say too much for beginners. So the people that are trying to start NGOs are financially being choked by the community expectations because of the already existing NGOs and the different gospel that the political leaders are spreading. Thank you so much, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that. Let's have back Rebecca. Rebecca, you were discussing with us the challenges that the CSOs face in their operation, aside from the closure of the CSOs that just happened recently.
One of the challenges is that the donor power dynamics involved. You find that a donor would want you to implement what they want according to their thematic areas, but it will not necessarily build the community that you're working in. That is one of the challenges. So navigating these donor spaces is different, and sometimes it's a bit frustrating. And it has to align with government, since we are development partners together with government. Is it aligning to what government wants? Is it aligning to what communities want? Is it a necessity for communities? Then we have blackmail from leaders. You find that if you're doing a project, then the leader says, if you don't give me this and this, then upon project evaluation or project audits, I will say that the project was not in the area. So that is like the worst thing that can happen. They will tell you to refund the money. Another thing, the distance to be covered and tools to access or to do your work. You find that you have a few machinery like laptops, a car, or a motorcycle to get to the farthest village. So you find that distance to be covered, you're going to tell somebody, especially if it's the rural area, to have to hire a border to get to where they're going. And sometimes the community has now gone to the gardens. You have to find them into the gardens. The climate these days is not favorable. So you're on a border, the rain hits you with all the papers, and then you reach you find you're disorganized. Then the lack of financing. There is limited financing. The donor thematic areas are limited to certain specifics. So you find that there is limited financing for community development, for monitoring and tracking, for particular areas. In particular, you have people tell you go to a donor and he says, no, our focus is northern Uganda. No, the western Uganda is very okay. Those people are very okay. There are very many unconscious and conscious biases around the different regions that we work in. So you find that the needs of one region are not met and the others are met. So there is an imbalance there, and how to navigate those spaces. Then lastly, housing of these NGOs. You're renting, so today you've shifted location, you've gone to another place. So you find that the community is used to one place, then you have to advertise that I've moved to another place. Then we have that the staff. You see, civil society and NGOs tend to mentor their staff, and then before you know it, the best staff have been stolen with promised better remuneration. So you're back to getting new ones and mentoring them. So time gives you a backlash in the community. If the person who's doing the projects better than the other new person, the community would want that particular person, but they've left. So we also have that there are a lot of community issues that we cannot handle at once. It's overwhelming. You find that you have just finished this issue, another issue has come up, but it's still in the project area or program area you've been dealing with. Lack of clear communication, all those administrative issues, where you have, people stealing things that belong to the NGOs, like laptops. It sets you back unless you've backed up. So them also, the NGOs not being inclusive friendly, for example, because of the limited financing, they cannot be able to have maybe a lump for the PWDs to pass, maybe accommodate pregnant mothers, or have spaces that can accommodate mothers that have just given birth. So all these things are some of the challenges. And then the little networking ability. You find that the NGOs that have on CSOs that have been around for a very long time, they have their cocoon. Then the new ones, they have their cocoon. So there is not a lot of networking to get the older ones and the younger ones all together and mentor each other to growth. But nevertheless, we rise. Thank you, Fancy. Back to you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. So let's have Edward into the discussion. So Edward, we are discussing some of the challenges that the CSOs face in their operation, aside from the closure of the CSOs that just happened, and we would like to get your view.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, I've had a problem with internet. I loaded 1 GB is there, but I don't know, there's need for improvement on the MTN. I was used to have free cell. Ideally, there are quite a lump sum of challenges that CSOs are facing in this country, but also they are not unique to other CSOs. They are not unique. The challenges that we are facing are not unique from the challenges that other CSOs face across the globe. One of the challenges that I see commonly or recently is sustainability challenges. You find, yes, we are not for profit, but other NGOs outside, like India and the rest, there are those that are raising money and they're engaged in the profitable businesses, and they invest this money in the NGO sector, and you find them that they are really sustainable and they're able to continue with their programs. You find an NGO has very good objectives, very good strategies, and you really say, I wish this organization really had resources or finances to implement these strategies. Very good ideas. And some of these NGOs have been started by sometimes even fresh graduates from the university. You find that they have appealing ideas, but there is no support for these ideas to grow, or these ideas to go to the next level. So there's sustainability challenges, and this is really affecting very many, even the old CSOs. You find when the donors pull out, they are nowhere. Yeah, I'm sorry I was offline, so maybe some of these points will be repeated because maybe one of the participants could have hinted on them, but I was offline, struggling to get back. So we've not had sustainable strategies as CSOs. You find an NGO has been existing for 30 years, but after 30 years, if there was any pull-out of the donors for one reason or the other, the NGO is nowhere to be seen. And I see this as a very, very big challenge for most of the CSOs in this country, but across the globe. Something that we need to think through as CSOs, how do we become sustainable? For very many NGOs in this country, we are living in the rented houses where you're paying 2 million per month, you're paying 1 million per month. But incidentally, when you engage the donors, you tell them, look what, if you gave me this money, and I buy a plot here in Masindi, you can run and get a plot of 10 million somewhere, and you put up the house within the next 3 years, you'll have a room where you can, operate from. At least you'll have already cut off a certain cost. So, but yet donors don't see that. This is one of the challenges as CSOs that we need to look at. How can we get funding that pushes us to be sustainable? Yes, we can depend on donors, but not that we can depend on the donors up to the dot. Where we can stand on our own and say, as Coordinate Uganda, without the donors, we can be able to implement. We can cut down the secretariat, maybe remain 2 or 3 people, but at least we shall be existing. That is one of the biggest challenges I see CSOs facing. And we also see the donor conditionalities. They have already, I think this has already been mentioned. And these donor conditionalities, you find that donors come up with a funding framework with very complex requirements, proposals, and CSOs, the growing CSOs are not able to get this funding just because of the conditions, the requirements, and they are eliminated automatically. The funding comes like this to support the needed, the young growing CSOs, but in most cases, these CSOs are left out. We have issues of capacity, and maybe one of the members could have hinted on it already. Capacity challenges, capacity gaps, and I think there is need for an arrangement of capacity building. We've had so many networks like the NIVA, Uganda National NGO Forum, but there is need for that, even coordinators per se. But this capacity building program, it needs to be consistent, but also it all lingers around resources, because once you do not have resources, you can't also run an effective capacity building program. Issues of unhealthy competition among the CSOs is there. Find CSOs sideline each other, fight each other, bite each other, and at the end of the day, we are not able to benefit or implement work the way we're supposed to implement it. You find that of course, we are competing for funding, survival, and so on. And this has also, it leads to bad blood among the CSOs and collisions and fights. And sometimes we've had CSOs collapsing as a result of the tensions amongst them. Then CSOs have also been heavily affected by in terms of recruitment. You find that most of the CSOs have founders, the founder syndrome, and so on. This is my organization. I started it. I have to die with it. It is my mother. It is like a personal property. So they personalize the organization. Things go in the wrong direction just because it is centered around one person. The decision-making process is centered around one person. The recruitment of even staff, you find that it is no longer like a community thing. It is like a family thing. The staff are all relatives, and that has also greatly affected the CSOs. Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Edward, for that. Let me get back to Joanna. So with the issues such as closure of CSOs that shrink the civic space, what alternatives do you think CSOs have?
Thank you so much, Fancy. Alternatives when it comes to CSOs and their spaces being shrinked, I think we have a role to play as NGOs and all the CSOs, including those that are in different sectors, to have each other's back. Because if we are going to join the people shrinking the spaces and say, no, you people are being bad here, and we start judging each other, then at the end of the day, time will come and we are also in the same space. Because just because you've seen an accident somewhere and say, oh, it wasn't my car, or it wasn't a car that I know, a day will come when those statistics will become numbers, and the numbers that you will know, and then they will get to people that you know, and then yourself. So I feel like we are doing a lot of backbiting when it comes to CSOs and NGOs. We are not cooperating. So part of what we have to do to keep standing is to support each other. And also, and in terms of supporting each other, I'm not saying when someone starts saying this is wrong, you equally start supporting without analyzing. So we can always have each other's background check to say, okay, we are all CSOs. What this person is putting out there is probably not the right way as much as it's right, but let's not do it publicly for other people to feel like we are pinning ourselves. No, you can have your behind scenes of negotiation and say this is what we are attacking, but okay, this is what we are going to deal with, and this is the how. So we advise each other on what to do, because I don't think someone in the government is going to come and say we have suffocated you enough, and now here we are to rectify whatever we've done. No, that is not going to happen. And so we have to support each other, NGOs and civil society organizations, in everything that we do. We have to have a behind scene kind of correction amongst us. And then another thing, we have to be clear with the objectives that we are putting out there as CSOs and NGOs. If you're saying my objective is this and this, then let's not get into the community and do otherwise, because one person is being brutalized, and then we feel like all our emotions are high up and we want to attack immediately. No, let's also be in check of what our objectives are, our goals, our aim, and I think then the spaces will not be suffocated a lot more than what we are seeing now. Yeah, thank you, Fancy. Over to you,
Joanna. Yes, thank you so much, Joanna. So let me have back Rebecca. So Joanna has talked about CSOs working together. So I would like to get your opinion, Rebecca. How best can CSOs work together to help each other ensure that there is provision of the different services that they offer to the community?
Thank you, Fancy. I hope you can hear me. One way they can ensure that they follow up together. They have joint accountability. To sit down and say, I think you're not moving the right way. I think you're diverting from the clear objectives. Being each other's accountability persons is one of the key things. We hold each other accountable and say, hey guys, I think you forgot this, respectfully. And mentoring. When we mentor younger persons, together we share our knowledge and values of how to move forward. Also, one of the things is partnerships. Partnerships are critical for the development in terms of sustainability, in terms of projects, in terms of monitoring. Partnerships going as a coalition, as CSOs, as NGOs, let's partner together. But also understanding our challenges and what are their root causes, because most of these challenges are brought by money. So how do we navigate the spaces together? And also having each other's backs when they attack one of our own. We use the different spaces and not expect everybody to be at the front line. There are those that will be at the front line. There are those that will be on social media. There are those that will be on the grassroots. There are those that will be negotiating and mediating. So understanding our different roles that we play for for the betterment of each other. And that is one also critical thing that we need to get out, that you'll find others are mad that, oh, this NGO did not come out for me, blah blah blah. But then you realize that we are not understanding each other's roles and capabilities and what we can do differently. Some are negotiators, some are the frontline soldiers, the vanguards. So that, but also helping each other grow in terms of let's shift from donor minds. We need to go back to the round table and say, how can we live without the donor? Is it acquiring property? How are we going to acquire that property? Is it ensuring we invest in stocks or shares? How are we going to do that together and move forward? I think that's it. But also I need a linkage between the rural and the urban, the young and the old. Yes, because the youth will speak out for you, and the young will the old will advise. Thank you so much. Back to you now, Fancy.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca. Edward, having been in the NGO world for a long time, the fate of 54 CSOs hang in a balance. What do you think are their alternatives?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Fancy. The alternatives, of course, is for the CSOs that are not already closed, is the compliance. For the CSOs that were closed, it is one, it is engagement and dialogue with government, but also we have representation on the NGO bureau. And I think that representation must be exploited, but also I think there were some initiatives by Uganda National NGO Forum to engage government and follow up with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And we are very optimistic that these are good procedures to ensure that such a kind of gaps are resolved. But also it's a very big lesson to us CSOs, the CSO fraternity, and that one, compliance is a very important thing. And again, it's very important that government gets to know that we are very key partners in development. We need to emphasize our role and contribution into the development sector, and to continue strengthening our partnership with government to understand what we do. Sometimes there is misinformation and lack of clarity in terms of the work that we do. And sometimes people tend to think that maybe such and such a CSO might be anti-government. And in so doing, they start following you up. I was in Nebi when I told you we have work in West Nile. And I will not mention one of the NGOs, but the RDC was so bitter with me. Actually, it was like, there is this NGO, it's an international NGO, but the way they do their work, they support a lot of activism in the community. They have people, they said this against the government. It's like they are really fighting a political with government. And then I was like, what? So I think there is need also for checks and balances. Who are the people that we are working with? Maybe we could be giving them the right message, and then for them, they take the wrong message. So it's very important to clarify information and to always sometimes follow up the people that we are working with. Sometimes we could even think that we are okay, but when they actually people within the CSO who actually thinks, they are could. Hello, can you hear me there? I was saying there could be, we could be, say, as coordinate here, and we have as an umbrella network, and we are having volunteers that are doing work in the community, and they could be going the wrong way. So there should be checks and balances in terms of the work that we do to ensure that actually we are on the right track. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward. I would like to get back to Joanna. So Edward has given us his opinion on the alternatives that the CSOs, the 54 CSOs that hang in a balance have. So what is your take on that? What alternatives do you think the 54 CSOs have at the moment to add on the ones that Edward has given us?
Sorry, you might want to repeat the question again a little.
Okay. Earlier on, I asked a question on what alternatives the 54 CSOs have at the moment, and Edward has ably discussed it, and I would like to get your opinion on that as well. What alternatives do you think the 54 CSOs have at the moment?
The 54 CSOs at the moment, I could say the alternatives I'm looking at is them sitting back and doing like a background check. Of course, we have tweeted and Facebooked about everything, but then as we are also doing that, we are not sure these people are actually, like, you can be out there on the front line defending someone, but you're actually not like very sure if their operations with the government and everything is doing well. So so that they might need to do a background check on everything, and then as well as look at what are they doing in the community. Are they still on the first objective that was set to be done when they were forming the NGOs and the CSOs? Are they still on the right objective? Are they doing the things the right way? Are they communicating the right way? Because there is one thing putting out a paperwork that has everything that you're doing and then doing otherwise. Those are like two different things. So the alternative I can give them, yes, closure has happened. We have ranted enough. And then what next? Can we do a background check and make sure everything is in order? Then maybe the noise can yield something, so to say. So me, I think we need to do a background check as NGOs and CSOs if everything is really in place, and then first put the noise on hold. As of now, that's my advice. Thank you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Rebecca, I'm back to you, and I would like to get your take on that as well. We have heard from Edward and Joanna. So what is your opinion on the alternatives that the 54 CSOs who hang in a balance right now? What alternatives do they have?
Okay, thank you, Fancy. You can hear me? Well, they can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, they can go back to the drawing board and re-strategize. One of the other key things is for those that have not registered, can start the registration process. They can ask for a mediator or an arbitrator to negotiate this together with the NGO Bureau. For those who were accused without any fault, they can reapply, re-engage. I believe that there are those options. However, also we have to sit down and say, where did we go wrong? And when you see that there was nothing that was wrong, then you can move forward. Is it shutting down? Is it restarting? Is it reorganizing? Is it use of social media to advocate? Because we cannot just only be on ground in the grassroots. There is also space to use on social media. There is space that cannot be shrinked, that is available. So use of the available spaces that are not government owned. You can use YouTube, you can use Facebook, although it's still blocked. You can use Twitter, you can use Snapchat to do more advocacy. It's just an account that you have to set up and then do advocacy. So there is also that option But there's also an option of helping the community take on the information that they gave them and use it for better use. But at the moment, I think it's going back to the drawing board and re-strategizing. Thank you. Back to you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Let me get back to Edward. So how best do you think the CSOs can work with government to ensure a conducive environment for operation of both parties? Yes, Edward, how best do you think the CSOs can work with government to ensure a conducive working environment for both the CSOs and the government? Okay, as we wait for Edward, let me move to Joanna with the same question. How best do you think the CSOs and the government can work together to ensure a conducive environment for both parties? Am I being heard? Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Fancy.
Oh, okay. Then I don't know what is happening, but maybe you can respond to that. Then we will have Joanna and Edward at a later stage. So how best do you think this
Okay.
together?
We can start by it's not just about condemning all the time. We can also applaud where government is doing right, where it's performing best and profile the best performers, and recommendations for the worst performers. Sometimes we need also to understand how government is working and the kind of environment the government officials are working in, and understand also where they're coming from. Put ourselves in their shoes and understand where they're coming from. Order from above, and you cannot object to order from above, such things. But then also doing partnerships together will bring us closer together, sitting down and drafting programs and projects where we can work together, monitor together, not all the time condemning. There's a time I attended a meeting and somebody was talking about how Godba was a very good CSO leader. And this was a government official. He said Godba would come and show you where you've gone wrong, and then after tell you this is how you can do it. And actually, when you try it Godba's way, it works. So that is an example of how one CSO leader's work speaks for itself. So how do we have some of these people, but also us doing a background check on how we are treating our fellow workmates, employees in the civil society fraternity. How do we work together and ensure that we are communicating together with government? How do we put out the message? Sometimes, the communication channels or the pathways are not good. How do we put out a message that does not just condemn? How do we put out a message that shows that we are together as Ugandans in this? And how can we do better? There are times you see people call somebody names and judge before a sentencing has even happened. So such things, we need to communicate better. We need to work together. We need to hold each other to account. We need to monitor and track together. We need to move each step together and resolve each conflict that has happened that moment. We don't need to wait after like maybe another one has happened, then we keep stomaching the anger. No, where there is a conflict, we need to sit and resolve it. Another one comes up, we resolve it. So back to you, Fancy.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This has been a very, very fruitful discussion. We have come to the end of our discussion for today. So I would like to give each panelist a chance to give us closing remarks, 2 minutes each. And I would like to start with Edward, if he's with us. Okay. Joanna, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please give us your closing remarks in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, Fancy. I would just say that apart from the closure and everything, the government and CSOs and NGOs, we have to be whatever we require from each other, we must be sure we are doing the same. Okay, I think my microphone had muted itself. Yeah, so if we're saying we need government to respect us, we should equally be respecting it, and then we generally we have to always sit and make sure every other time when we're doing our activities, when we are communicating out there, when we're doing our PR for whatever we are doing, we are literally doing what is required of us. And then because I see some CSOs and NGOs that really put the government to accountability in the most respectful way. So I think with all the dust and everything, we need to actually put that dust down, have mutual respect, put everything that we want to see on board out there, have our lines checked thoroughly, and then we'll be good to go. That's what I can say, that as CSOs and NGOs, we have a very, very big mantle ahead of us, and therefore we cannot afford to keep making noise online when we're not doing what we set out to do, and we're equally not showing any results. Yeah, so that's what I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have closing remarks from Edward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fancy. This has been a quite interactive session, and thank you, the organizers, CCG, and the team at hand. The CSOs have huge challenges, but also opportunities to continue engaging in the work that they are doing. The political environment is changing day by day, and it's a little bit tight, and it cuts across all the CSOs. But what I would suggest is for CSOs to strengthen the cohesion. It's high time that we strengthen the cohesion amongst ourselves, talk with one voice, to build one another, to really support one another, such that we remain in that circle together. We face the challenges that befall us together, and then we support each other where we find that there are problems. And this unity and strengthening cohesion, and then there is also networking, by the way, seriously amongst ourselves, because sometimes CSOs have been sidelined and squeezed in the corner where we are not, and maybe where we've not had. So let people come up and say these are the issues that are coming up, and then for that central coordination. We've had so many networks at the national level, but sometimes when you're confronted with a certain challenge as a CSO on the ground, you run here, this one refers you to another. You run here, maybe you need some legal advice, this one refers you to another. So there is need for, where do we get information? There is need for that coordination at the national level to see to it that there is a effective flow of information among CSOs when we face problems of that nature. Whom do we run to, and what can we do, and what are some of the best solutions and alternatives that can make us make a headway. Of course, I also hinted on sustainability as one of the challenges affecting us seriously as CSOs, and I think it's high time that we started investing in sustainability, so that our good efforts, our good objectives, our good ideas do not just die somewhere in the shelves, or they just remain in black and white without being implemented. So that is very, very important. And of course, the information sharing should be across the CSOs, but also the sectors in government, the line ministries, and so on, such that people know what we are doing. But also there is need for us to touch base with the beneficiaries, the communities that we work for, such that they are able to come up and be on our side. This is what we need.
Okay. I would like to get closing remarks from Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Fancy. All I can say is that it has been a wonderful engagement, and I pray that we have more that are focused on youth NGOs. But I know that going forward, if we engage more with government and see each other as partners other than enemies, then we will be able to ensure that we are working for the good of the people, especially the grassroots people. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Back to you, Fancy.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. I would like to extend my utmost gratitude to the panelists who spared time to be with us from 2 p.m. up to now 4 p.m. I would like to thank you so much for being a part of the community talk show. I would like to extend my gratitude to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for organizing this talk show, and as well to the viewers who have been watching. Our topic today has been, how has closure of CSOs affected your work? We had a panel of 3. We had Mr. Mbiheebwa Edward, who is the Executive Director of Masindi District NGO Forum. We had Ms. Joanna Atukunda, who is the founder, UPLIFT SLUM Africa, and also co-founder of League of Young Professionals, and works with people in the slums. We also had Ms. Turyatunga Rebecca Juna, who works with Shema Development Foundation, and she's also the founder of Juna Foundation. I would like to appreciate the panelists and everybody who has participated in this. And our discussion has come to an end. And thank you so much for viewing. See you again next time. Thank you.